Hi everyone, welcome to Ask a Property Manager episode number 47. Today is November 18th, 2020. Coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, Principal Broker of Own Buffalo, Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about stealing an entire home, appraisal issues when purchasing an As Is Foreclosure, and landlord-friendly thermostats, and so much more. Guys, if I look a little bit cold today, or if you hear me stuttering, it's because I have property management problems today too. I stumbled into the office today and discovered that our heat is out, so I'm actually waiting on our heating guy to swing through here. But in the meantime, I'm a little bit chilly this morning myself, so we are obviously in a cold weather climate here in Buffalo. Not always the most inviting when it comes to walking into a cold office first thing, but we'll get the job done. We got a good show for you here today. Before we jump into all that, we're going to plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager come out every Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find those over at facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. That's where we run the live show. You can also catch replays on the Facebook page as well as on our YouTube page over at youtube.com/ownbuffalo. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram. We obviously post different content there than what we would post on either Facebook or on YouTube. Last but not least, don't forget that you can grab a free 30-minute consultation with me over at ownbuffalo.com. I do have a couple of slots available for this week. I'm not taking on any slots next week with the Thanksgiving holiday. And then the following week, I will be taking a few appointments as well. I can't believe that we are already coming up on Thanksgiving. Next week is Thanksgiving already. This has been the longest and shortest year ever, all at the same time. It's kind of painful that way. Last but not least, don't forget about the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. New episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every Thursday over at rentprep.com/podcast or anywhere podcasts are heard. This week's episode, we're going to be talking about an increase in rental fraud, how to handle noise complaints between tenants, and charity donations in lieu of rent payments. It's definitely an interesting episode. You're not going to want to miss out on this one. As I mentioned, new episodes drop every Thursday over at rentprep.com/podcast or anywhere podcasts are heard. Let us jump into, let's do a little humor before we jump back to our news articles here. This was one that was posted. It's actually been posted on a few different Facebook groups that I've been on. This is literally a gutter downspout that has been cut in half to make access for, I believe that's an electrical conduit. That's a real bright move. I mean, that's Class A construction work all day, every day there. So let's jump into our news here. We do have some more humor after, but I want to get into the news articles here. This one is actually local. This one comes to us out of Rochester, but it was reported by WIVB, which is one of our local CBS affiliates here in Buffalo. Rochester area landlord says renter is trying to sell his house on Craigslist. Let's make this text a little bit larger here. Matt Druin is a landlord and housing owner with 117 properties in the region. He says the COVID-19 pandemic has hit both tenants and landowners hard. He says, unfortunately, there are still occupants who cannot pay their rent, which he understands. There are some, though, who are taking it to a new level. There's tenants who didn't pay before COVID, and then when COVID came down, they sort of took advantage of the situation. One of the homes on Stonewood Avenue he rents out says tenants have not paid in months, and to his surprise, he came across an ad on Craigslist listing the property for $45,000. I came to find out it was the tenant that was posing as me, the property owner, looking to sell the property and collect cash. Druin says while this scam is something he's heard of, this one's a first for him, and now they're using this situation to prey on other people, which I think is just absolutely disgusting, he says. One man says he was shown the property by the renter posing as the owner. Right away, suspicion set in. When I dove deeper into it, I knew something shady was going on. He was trying to collect cash up front, and I was like, that's not how this stuff works, says the man who wished to remain anonymous. Lawyer Michael Lees says if the renter did post this ad posing as the owner, that is a fraud charge right off the bat. If you're on Craigslist and you see a deal that's too good to be true, it probably is. That's a pretty important point to highlight. The easy question here is, why not just evict a guy trying to sell the place? Lease? I'm not sure how his last name is pronounced. I'm going to say Lease. Lease says that due to COVID, some laws can appear a bit unclear and legal teams are keeping their distance. Governor Andrew Cuomo has also announced a moratorium on evictions until January 21st, 2021. Nobody's even dipping their toe in the water because they don't expect to really go anywhere with these evictions, Lease says. Druin says until he can catch the renter in the act or a party actually gets ripped off, there's not much the police can do. But he still tells his fellow housing providers, if you have become a victim or believe you become a victim to one of these, alert the authorities and file a police report. News 8 did try to reach out to the person who posted the ad and received no response. Check back for future updates. That's a new scam by me. We've seen them in the past, usually rental scams where, and we've had it happen to us, where you'll take somebody else's, or a scammer rather, will take somebody else's photos from, say, Zillow on a rental, and they'll take that same rental listing and copy and paste it over to Craigslist for several $100s less than what it should be. And then they'll use that to try to scam people out of money. We see a lot of that, to the point that we actually have a sign. I'm actually going to pause Mike here for 1 second. I'm going to go grab a sign because I've got one across the office. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, so I'm back. I went and grabbed one of our signs. So we put these up on all of our rental properties when we have them vacant and there's somebody who is, or when we have them vacant and we're out showing the properties. Generally, we'll hang one of these inside the window of the apartment facing the front so that people can actually see the sign from outside to hopefully prevent themselves from being scammed. The other thing we do is we hang them inside in a couple of different places. So we'll hang one maybe in the kitchen or in the bathroom or something like that, right inside the front door usually, so that if somebody's walking through, they're likely to see that sign too. So we try to do as much as we can to prevent people from getting scammed. Obviously, that's on the rental side of the house. I typically don't see this with sales. I'm actually kind of surprised that that this actually went down, to be honest with you. I think this is probably one of the first times I've seen somebody try to steal an entire house. I know there are some deed scams out there and things of that nature, but this is the first time I've seen somebody be so bold as to just try to take an entire house and put it up on Craigslist as for sale. So that's an interesting one. Hopefully that guy is able to get the ad taken down at least and move forward. Next news article of the day. NAR's Yun, who's the chief economist for NAR, expects a brisk winter housing market. This one is coming to us from Housing Wire. We're going to jump right into this one. This year's been full of surprises, but the biggest might be how exceptional the housing market is performing, National Association of Realtors chief economist Lawrence Yun said on Tuesday. We're going to skip forward a little bit here. He talks a little bit about what a Biden presidency could mean for the housing market, but I wanted to mention this. Throughout his presidential campaign, former Vice President Joe Biden advocated for housing, including introducing a $15,000 home buyer tax credit. The tax credit would be immediately available at closing, so rather than filing your tax return on April 15th to get the tax credit, it would be available immediately at closing, which in essence means that it's a down payment assistance, Yoon said. I'm sure there will be some income phase out so that millionaires do not get this, but for many moderate income families, this could be quite a substantial down payment assistance. Iced coffee is not the right drink for not having heat in your office, by the way. A lingering trend in the housing market has been the increase of homeowners relocating to the suburbs and vacation towns. Now that work from home policies have been implemented for many, employees don't need to live in cities anymore. In fact, Yoon said that working from home has made office occupancies decrease by nearly 41%. We've talked multiple times, both on this show and on the Rent Prep podcast, about what's happening in the market right now with people moving from larger metros to smaller metros, or from any sort of a metro into either a suburb or a rural setting. And it's happening more and more because people have this ability to work from home in a lot of instances. The one stat that I did find interesting there is that that office occupancy decrease by nearly 41%. That's pretty substantial. I don't think that we've really started to scratch the surface of what the commercial real estate market is going to hold in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. But it's going to be scary when you see stats like that. Skipping ahead a little bit, while working from home has been a widespread result of the pandemic, Yoon said that he believes this trend will continue even once a vaccine has been discovered. I would agree with that. And if one does not have to commute every single day, then people may say, well, I don't mind living further out from the downtown areas. Homeowners are also relocating to bigger, more expensive homes. Not only that, but the homes are becoming multi-generational too. That's kind of an interesting thing to see happening, multi-generational homes, where you have households merging together, blending together. It's interesting because you can afford more home that way for sure. So that's an interesting thing that we're seeing as well. Housing inventory has remained lower than ever this year. Yoon said that one thing that could encourage builders to create more inventory would be removing tariffs and bringing down the price of lumber. We actually need a production increase in lumber right now. I don't know as though I'm sure the tariffs are definitely having an impact on it. And the price of lumber is up something like 160% from this time, from April of this year. So lumber prices are way up, but I think a lot of that is a production factor and not just a tariff factor. Going forward, Yoon said that the homeownership rate could be challenged because we simply don't have enough supply. And that's where he hits the nail on the head. When I was reading this article, I was thinking to myself, the Buffalo market, a $15,000 homebuyer tax credit is great in the Buffalo market, but we don't even have enough inventory as it sits right now. We are in a deep seller's market here in Western New York, and throwing another $15,000 onto the pile is just going to put an influx of more buyers into the market when we already don't have enough inventory, which is going to cause a housing prices to spike, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need more building essentially to take place. Not enough homes for sale means multiple offers, prices rising too fast, and it may limit some of the renters becoming homeowners, Yoon said, basically recapping what I was also just saying. Mortgage rates have always been lower than ever this year, helping the housing market. Yoon predicts that in 2021, mortgage rates will stay roughly the same. It was 2 days ago when Freddie Mac's CEO said he's resigning, and I think that's based on the decision that Joe Biden will be the incoming president, because he may have perceived that Fannie and Freddie perhaps could be privatized under Trump, Yoon said. But now under Joe Biden, he will be widening the government guarantee, which means that mortgage rates should remain very low without the privatization, because we want to ensure that Fannie and Freddie did not make a mistake of chasing after subprime lending as what happened 10 years ago, but just serve the role of homeownership to assure that the government guarantee provides the lowest interest rates for credible home buyers. Over the summer, housing markets remain busy due to pent-up demand from springtime home buyers waiting out the pandemic. Yoon said that winter should remain busy as well, and even into spring 2021. Pending contracts are up strongly, implying that this winter may be one of the best winters for home sales activity. I mean, it's not going to be spring or summer, so one has to compare this winter with other past winters. And by winter to winter comparison, this year could be one of the best based on the breakout of the pending contracts at a much higher level. Yeah, I would probably agree with pretty much everything said in this article. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to what we're seeing in terms of people moving from metros to bigger metros to smaller metros, or from metros out into suburbs or country. I definitely agree with what he's talking about with the work from home situations. The office occupancy decreased by 41%. That's a little bit scary, I'm not going to lie. I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot more of that. I think that commercial real estate is going to take a real beating in the next couple years. But there you have it. That is the state of the real estate market per the National Association of Realtors chief economist, Mr. Lawrence Yun. Let's jump back into some more humor. This one was posted on the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. I've never seen something like this. It looks to me as though that's some kind of a sewer drain, like a sewer access. I suppose it could be an old. It can't be an old septic tank or something like that, I guess. But that's definitely a unique one. I've never seen anything like that. Obviously, it's captioned, "What's your first thought about this?" And pretty much everybody on the thread said, "Is this where April O'Neil from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles lives?" So, pretty interesting one there. Let's jump right into our questions from housing providers around the country. We're going to start with this one here, and all of these today have been pulled from the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. You can find that over at facebook.com/groups/rentprep. Just let them know that you found it through the Ask a Property Manager show. Let's see here. Sending tenant reminders. Does anyone send out reminders to their tenants? For example, a reminder for no pets, no smoking, no additional occupants, clean your air filters, don't flush tampons, things like that. Our tenants get one reminder per month to pay their rent, and that's because our software sends it out automatically. Everything that you're talking about there is a lease violation. So they're not getting a reminder letter, they're getting a lease violation letter. That's the way that we would handle a situation like that. All of those are what I would look at and say, those are lease violations. You should be sending a lease violation and not just a reminder. You might want to start it off as a hey, you know, just as a reminder, please don't do that. We've stopped going that route. We just issue the initial lease violation. We don't wait at that point. Coming up next, tenants turning heat off. I'm having issues with renters turning off the heat if they go away in the winter, or turning the thermostat to 45, which is low enough to cause concern. I'm in a colder climate where pipes can freeze, so this is a huge issue. Does anyone add a minimum temperature clause to their rental agreement? And has anyone else had these issues? Honestly, I'm surprised how often this comes up, whether the renters are 22 or 60 years old. The articles I'm reading online from State Farm and Consumer Reports say that a minimum temperature of 55 degrees is recommended. That's what we recommend as well. We recommend to all of our tenants that they set their thermostats no lower than 55 degrees to prevent pipes from freezing. We also recommend to them that if they're going to be gone for an extended period of time and they're turning the heat down, we actually tell them to open the doors underneath of the kitchen sink and underneath of the bathroom vanity and things like that, just so that those pipes have that much more warm air circulating around them. So 55 is probably about the lowest I would go. That's what we recommend to tenants is 55. That's what's in our lease clause, is that tenants cannot take the thermostat, tenants cannot take the thermostat any lower than 55. They do make thermostats that have high and low cutoffs. I actually pulled one up here. Let me switch screens here. This is a website called landlordstat.com. I'm not supported by them. As a matter of fact, I've never used their products. But they do have a ton of different thermostat styles here that have hard sets on the high temperature and low temperature. So even if the tenant wants to crank it up to 80, it's only going to go to 71 degrees. Or if they want that air conditioning set at 60 degrees, it's only going to get down to 76 or whatever you want it set to, essentially. I'm not sure how easy these are to defeat. I haven't really done a ton of research on them, to be honest with you, but this is a product that's available out there in the market, assuming that that's something that you can do. The one thing that would be of concern to me if I was looking at that would be, can I do that by state law? And I think the answer to that question is, if you're in control of the heat, I don't think there's any question as to whether or not you could install one of those thermostats, as long as you're in compliance with whatever your state's laws are requiring for temperatures. So like in New York State, we have to be at or above a certain temperature from November 1 through March 1 or whatever it is. I'd have to pull it up to find the info on it. I think you would be fine there if you were in control of the heat and you were making sure that the thermostat met those criteria. Even if you're not in control of the heat, if the tenant pays their own utilities, I think that you would still be okay there, as long as, again, you are compliant and making sure that you're meeting the minimum standards for whatever the state requirement is. So as long as you get one of those thermostats and it can't be turned any lower than 55, you should be fine, I would think. So that would be my theory on that. Hopefully that works out for you. We actually used to manage a bunch of student rentals by one of the college campuses here in Buffalo. And we would have this problem every single winter season, when we'd have it twice every single winter season. We'd have it next week when everybody goes home for Thanksgiving break. And then we would have it again the following month when everybody goes home for winter break. And honestly, the only way that we found to combat it was, once we knew everybody was leaving, we would ask tenants to tell us when they were departing. Some of them would, some of them wouldn't. It's just a fact of life. But what we would do is, any place that we knew was vacant, we would go in and manually check the thermostat to make sure that it was set at least 55 degrees. Is it an optimal solution? No, it's very time consuming, especially if you have a whole bunch of units or something like that. But it's definitely worth not having frozen pipes and not having to deal with that headache. Having had a property lost to frozen pipes as a result of something like this, it wasn't a student, actually. It was a thermostat ran out of batteries and the whole house froze up on one of our vacancies. The entire house froze. All of the pipes froze and everything else. It's not a fun time when pipes start to break. That's when you get a ton of damage. It's just a bad scene. So definitely do what you can to try to avoid something like that. See what you can do, maybe installing one of those thermostats, or even a Wi-Fi thermostat might be an option. Something like a Nest, if you can program that so that it can't be set below a certain temperature or what have you. So that's my theory on that. Hopefully that'll help you out with keeping your places warm and keeping your pipes unfrozen. Buying an as-is foreclosure. This is an interesting one because we actually do a fair amount of REO work here out of our office. Does anyone have any recommendations? We made an offer on a bank-owned foreclosure. House has been vacant for about 4 years, so the bank seller had the home winterized, and the home is in a cold weather climate. The property has a hot water baseboard heating system with a fuel oil fired boiler, which also provides domestic hot water. The electricity is turned off, and the municipal water has been turned off as well. The selling bank is telling us that we are purchasing it as is. We're okay with purchasing as is. Selling bank is also telling us they will not turn on the electricity or other utilities so the appraiser can check the plumbing and electrical fixtures. Is there a way around this? Any recommendations? We also have the ability to take out a home equity loan against another property we own outright. It would not cover the full amount of the offer, but we have other cash on hand we could tap into to cover the balance of the purchase price plus the estimated rehab costs. What would you recommend? So, having done some of this type of work before, I'll kind of explain to you where the bank is on this. Essentially, the bank is paid to have the property winterized in order to protect the pipes, like what we were talking about in the previous segment, amongst other things. It reduces their carrying costs as they don't have to keep the home heated and things of that nature. So it has a baseboard heating system with a fuel oil fired boiler, which also provides the domestic hot water. Electric and water are both turned off. Okay. So generally an appraiser is going to need to see everything fired up and running if you're using a traditional bank. They actually have to submit, certain sets of photos, and one of those photos is, or at least last I knew, one of those photos was a photo of water running through one of the faucets so that they can show that there's actually water at the house. Things of that nature. Some banks will appraise it differently if they plan on keeping the loan in-house, also called a portfolio loan. But if you're using like one of the larger banks or something like that, trying to go for a more traditional style mortgage, then they're going to be using a traditional style appraisal more often than not, and you're going to have issues with that. So the couple things that you can do is ask the seller if there are any records from the winterization regarding the boiler system, whether or not it was working at the time it was winterized, if there were any broken pipes or anything at the time that the property was winterized, because that happens a lot too, where you'll actually get to a property and the utilities have already been off, you already have broken pipes or something like that. Well, they'll just go through and winterize the rest of the system essentially. So that's something that you have to watch out for as well. You may have to buy this thing cash and do a refinance on it. If you can't find somebody that will do a portfolio loan or something along those lines, you may have to buy this thing in cash and then do a refinance on it once you have it up and running. If you're going to have to go that route, obviously be prepared to repair and replace things along the way in order to get it to that point. So you might also be able to talk to the bank and get the bank to approve you doing some of this work yourself. So essentially what you would have to do at that point would be get the electric turned on, which means meeting utility companies. You're gonna have to get the water turned on, which again means meeting the utility companies. You're gonna have to get the boiler fired up. You're probably gonna want an HVAC guy to look at that. And again, this is if you're talking about the more traditional appraisal. They're gonna wanna know that that boiler system and everything is working. So that might be an option, doing some of the work yourself. Just keep in mind that you may get to a point where you realize that it doesn't make sense to continue moving forward. So that's my thoughts on that one. Buying foreclosures as is kind of a tricky situation, especially when the utilities and stuff like that aren't really on. It makes it a lot more difficult to get it financed traditionally. You may have to look into some more creative financing options, like you had mentioned, pulling the cash out of something you own outright and being able to go in cash. That might be the play for you here, unless you can get the bank to give in and de-winterize the place, or you can get the bank to agree to letting you do the de-winterization work yourself. Security deposit refunds. Should we return a full security deposit? Our tenants have just moved out, and we learned from a neighbor that they apparently smoked a lot in the backyard, which bothered others in the complex. We'd suspected something, but there isn't a smell or other evidence indoors. The unit was left in good condition, though they left a few personal items in closets/cabinets and food in the fridge and freezer, which need to be thrown out. So they smoked outside, and they left a few items in the closets and the fridge freezer. Yeah, that's maybe a few bucks for cleanup since they left some stuff that you had to deal with. But I mean, if you're concerned about the smoking outside, as long as they picked up their cigarette butts, where else do you want them to smoke? Do you really want them to smoke in your house? So I would say that they did exactly what you would want them to do as tenants by staying outside when they were smoking. As far as it bothering other people in the complex, that's a hard one to deal with. Some people just don't like smoke. Other people just don't like other people. So that's a tougher one to get into. We don't know a lot about the situation behind that. But as far as the security deposit refund goes, yeah, this looks like pretty much a full security deposit refund to me. I wouldn't be concerned about the smoking in the backyard because that's where I want them to smoke. Screening a homeowner for an apartment. I'm curious as to how you all screen applicants that have not rented in recent years due to owning their own home. The applicant is leaving town next year and sold their home, which works for me as I'm only looking for a short-term rental for this particular property. There's a couple things that you can do. So you're going to go through and screen them, rental application and doing a credit and background check and things of that nature. When you do that credit and background check, generally speaking, you're going to get a list of previous addresses associated with that individual, which you can cross-reference to see if their home, the address that they're claiming was their previous home, is listed on that. The other thing you can look at is their credit profile. And assuming they had a mortgage on the property, you'll be able to see that mortgage right up to the point where they paid it off, essentially, and it'll show as a closed file on their credit report. It'll show as a paid off mortgage, essentially, assuming that they've already moved out of the home that they are in. And it sounds like they're pretty much at that stage of the game here. So those would probably be the two easiest ways to look into something like that. Let me see, what else did I have jotted down here? Tax records indicating the sale. That's another thing you can go into, and that's publicly accessible. You can go to the tax records by going to the county clerk or the city clerk or something along those lines, and just asking who the registered owner is of a certain address. They can also tell you generally who the previous owner was as well. More often than not, you can access all this stuff right online. Excuse me, guys, got a little bit of the hiccups here. Generally speaking, you can access all this stuff online for free or a very, very nominal fee. And that's just the tax record side of things. The other thing you can do if you have access or if you are friends with a real estate agent or something along those lines is ask for MLS records from the sale. So if they sold the property on the MLS, there will be an old listing which should show as sold. You may also be able to look at the photos of the home that they were living in to see how they were taking care of it prior to their sale of the property as well. So that might give you a little bit of an indication as to the condition of the home when they moved out of it, or at least when they put it on the market. So that's basically how I would screen something like that down. You're obviously not going to have a landlord reference the way that you would on a standard apartment to apartment tenant, but it's not something that would prevent me from renting to someone. As a matter of fact, generally speaking, homeowners make pretty good tenants because they understand what it takes to maintain a home. So you'll find that they don't usually do as much damage as what a traditional tenant would. Not always, but that's been our experiences. So, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can definitely help us to improve. Drop a question in the comments either on Facebook or YouTube, and your question may be picked up in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content or if we brought some value to your day, please do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. Next week, we're going to be back on November 25th. That's next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be back with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.